Okay, so I'm a degreed engineer, graduated from DeVry here in Arizona. Focused on after I got out of working for Bell Atlantic, built my own companies, started an IT operation for 10 years called Codesys. And then in 2003, we launched Triad Wireless because of the opportunities there. I have a lot of personal hobbyist experience in wireless, so I was very attracted to the idea. If you look over my left shoulder, you'll see a whole bunch of old ham and CB equipment to give you an example of how far back I went. The Triad Wireless was built originally to provide Wi-Fi hotspots in like Las Vegas and Phoenix areas. We morphed into we were asked to do a lot of specialized projects with municipalities. For example, North Las Vegas Water Department had 23 or 24 tanks, and somebody had gone into one of the tanks and poured something. They had no record of it other than the tank had been unlocked and they found the bucket. And so they had to literally drain 300,000 gallons of water that had to be thrown away. So they asked us to develop a citywide system with cameras to identify this if it happened again. So back in the late 2000s, pretty advanced. We kept working into those areas. We put in, I don't know if anybody had heard of a crash way back in 2007 on airplanes where they tried to take off the wrong runway and it was too short. And so we worked with Boulder City Airport to develop a system because they also had the same problem of people don't realize about 30% of the flights that come into small airports, there's no documentation for them. They don't know where they came from or where they're going to. So we were asked to develop a video surveillance system, again, based on a wireless infrastructure. And it just kept moving on. In 2008, when the economy collapsed, the municipalities kind of stopped. So I moved into consulting, and then we expanded the company into Wi-Fi and residential and business deployments. In 2015, we now it's getting into my presentation a little bit, but basically we provide internet across Arizona in certain areas, mostly Maricopa and Tucson. We've developed programs for education. We call Education Everywhere, which is $10 internet for any kid that needs it for school. And we work with a lot of specialized projects. I mean, our company list looks like, the California Angels, Tesla, Boeing. I'm sorry, not Boeing, Airbus, excuse me, losing track of all the companies. And then a lot of cities. When COVID hit, we were contacted by half the districts in the state. It seems like the city of Phoenix asked us to do a deployment designed to deploy across the entire city. And we just got a lot of those requests because we're capable of rapid deployment of bandwidth, whatever that need is. So, okay, sorry, that's the background. I'll jump into the presentation, cover a little bit more there. But we are basically a wireless company that can connect anything, any place. In some cases, same day if necessary, if it's an urgent issue. We do a lot of. So our company was, like I say, in 2008 we started doing residential deployments, RV locations, things like that. We do consult to many of the manufacturers in our industry. In fact, on this picture alone, you can probably see 3 manufacturers of equipment that we help either in the initial design of the equipment or field testing the equipment to make sure it works the way it's supposed to. And in 2015, one of the products we used allowed us to expand tremendously fast across a lot of Maricopa County and Pima County. So when the equipment finally got here, we were set up to really move. And that's in the last 6 years, we've had over 1,400% growth. And we're on target to actually accelerate that right now with what happened with COVID. So this picture is actually the top of a building at Central and Thomas, one of the best views in the city. It's I think 280 feet high, and you can see how much equipment's up there handling, connecting the stuff all over the city, up to about 25 miles, I think. I think that little antenna that I'm playing with right there connects to a child's pediatric office down the street. But there's some big stuff up there. So we used to be called in when somebody else couldn't get there. Obviously, early 2000s, mid 2000s, fiber wasn't available every place. We took care of, if anybody here has been to the Grand Canyon, the last town you go through is Tucson. Tucson had 45 meg for the entire town in all the hotels. When we got done, about 3 months later, they had about 1.5 gig, and we built in more capacity. And so they've been running on our wireless system for the last few years. I think Mylan's E-rate program just got fiber into the town. It's supposed to be turned on shortly. So the other issue is we work in areas where it may not be profitable to put in other equipment. In these two pictures, the one on the right is Forest Lakes, Chevron Butte School District. We won a final mile bid to go up there. We wanted to run some tests. So our guys fabbed this entire tower and the base literally overnight and had it up there, up and running the next day when we got the call. So this would be, just to give you an example of what we're going to run into, this would be considered an extreme non-line of sight environment because of the vegetation. So other areas we cover are, many areas just had DSL for a long time. Some of them have cable, but it's a poor quality cable. And even if they don't, we did a test in an area that had DSL and cable from CenturyLink and Comcast, two of the 5 biggest players in the country. We took 45% of the customer base away from them, and we stopped advertising because we just didn't have time to get to them all. The next line, you can see that we can do speeds of generally between 100 meg and 1 gigabit per second. Distance is not a problem with those numbers. Once you start getting above 100 meg, then it becomes an issue out at 4 and 5. About 5 miles, you got to start looking at it a little harder. Business services, we deploy up to 10 gigabits per second. And we can transport that several miles also. And then again, we've got teams that the tower on the left, this was a replacement tower that had to be brought up because we lost a tower in Tonopah with 0 notice. They literally had to shut the tower down, and we had to build up a new tower. And we had 120 people back online within 72 hours. To give you, just kind of gives you an idea of some of the stuff that we do. So the final mile project, which was Mylan Eaton and Wes and Sean, there's several people involved with it. I posted the website up. Brilliant idea in the sense that by getting through the bureaucracy of the bigger federal bids and letting us go direct, it was and then the state funding it, companies like ours could deploy it much, much faster. Literally, Pima we had in 8 weeks, and honestly, if we didn't have as much trouble with the farmer, we would have had it up in 3 weeks. So we had a little trouble with location, but other than that, I'm sorry, that's Paloma, excuse me, outside Gila Bend. So this is the Pima deployment. I think this one took about 4 months, not because there was any delay. We literally had troubles getting equipment because obviously when COVID hit, supply chains went down the toilet. This was this allows us to handle about 1,500 people around the city. We also built it for a dual value proposition in this sense. People that are on the Education Everywhere, we can deliver up to 100 meg per second, but our equipment costs on the tower and the client side are significantly lower. Equipment costs on the client side are about $150. The other equipment we have up there is way more expensive. Each one of those access points, you can see the square one in the front right here. That AP is $15,000. There's 4 of them up there. They're capable of handling up to 500 megabits per second out to a distance of about 10 miles. They're also designed to do what's called non-line of sight, which is go through trees. So actually, I just realized I was going to cover that in another slide. But deployment of stuff like this type of equipment is pretty quick versus fiber, which will take 3-4 years. And honestly, if you actually right now, we actually now have the capability of doing 1 gigabit per second off the same tower just by upgrading a few of the radios for a few $100s. So we jumped the gun a little bit, but they needed to get it up. So again, the same tower, but again, the explanation would be line of sight speeds, meaning no vegetation or buildings. We can do 100 to 2.5 gigabits per second. So we can literally do fiber speeds today. And the stuff that's coming out in the next 4 to 6 months, when the chipset shortage gets cleared up, will be even faster. Non-line of sight, and that's where it gets a little hairy, is the trees. You can see the trees in the background of that. Trees, vegetation is a big problem with deployments like this. The denser it is, the harder it is to get through, or the more expensive. And you can see the, I kind of made an example, line of sight, we can go forever. And we've got 50-mile links out there. Non-line of sight, however, is a much tougher and much more expensive project. The Chevron Butte project, with fewer users, will cost 6 times more than the cost it did for Paloma for the same number of users. Or I'm sorry, for even more users. The problem is that there is the federal government does not support enough spectrum to make non-line of sight work that well, but it's possible to do it. I'm going to move on here. So this is kind of our coverage map across Arizona right now. Most of this area that you're seeing here, in this area, this is all Maricopa County. You see Tucson, Nogales, and we've got 7 areas that we're launching out with Holbrook, Gila Bend. In fact, we're about to get on Gila Bend's towers. Let's see, Forest Lakes, which is Chevron Butte, Rimrock, let's see, St. John's, and I think there's another one. I apologize. I'll have to look at my notes, but we should have 7 more towns fully operational from final mile broadband done within 1 year of awarding of the contract. And we're doing it at about 1/10 the cost of what fiber deployment would be. So it is a much more efficient way to get bandwidth to people quickly. The other thing is it's financially feasible to handle kids. We can bring on kids at $10 a month, or as the federal government would rather do it, have us charge 3 times that, and they'll pay us for it, which is way to go, taxpayers. Then we can make it financially feasible so that the operation stays profitable, to keep it running. So in some of the mountainous areas, I brought this picture just to show you how we relay through areas. This area this is in Tucson, has 5 of these houses that do nothing but relay signal through there, so we can get onto the other side of the hills. And we can transport 10 gigabits per second. If anybody cares about latency, it's a sub 1 millisecond latency, which is actually faster than fiber. The physics, fiber is 0.7 times the speed of light. Wireless is about 96% the speed of light. So it's actually quicker. This is the Forest Lakes deployment. You can see our guys pulling an all-nighter, and they literally built this thing from scratch. Picked up a bunch of metal in Phoenix, took off, and put that tower up overnight, so we can do the field testing. So, oh, sorry, this is an old PowerPoint I modified. That's basically back of our office on any morning. So that's pretty much all I got. So anybody has any questions or anything I skipped, please let me know.
First of all, Rory, let me say that's just spectacular. It's a wonderful and inspirational example of some of what we're not hearing all that much about in terms of last mile stuff. An immediate question that comes to mind for me is, what's allowing you and your colleagues at Triad to make these kind of last mile connections that so many other people don't seem interested in pursuing?
Well, it has to be profitable in general. The only exception we have is that if it involves education everywhere, then it's budget's not our primary issue. We'll figure out how to do it. But the second problem is it's really a knowledge of RF engineering. Unfortunately, in the 90s, when Motorola pulled out of the United States in general, closed down most of their cell infrastructure, we lost a huge amount of RF engineers. So being able to do things like, for example, in Phoenix, we have to go from one building to another. Let's say they're half a mile apart, and there's another building in the middle of it, because obviously high rises, you got taller and shorter. We actually have the ability to bounce a signal off another building and basically play, ricochet to make it work on the other side. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that is out of the box engineering that has to work. A good example was another example like that was Airbus. When Airbus's engineers went inside the fuselages to be able to work on them, they would lose their connection to their inventory system under Wi-Fi. So they had to figure out a way to make that work. So that's where we came in and gave them an idea of how to make that work. We've been asked to do engineering for the Super Bowl and wireless stuff like that. So I mean, I can spend 6 hours telling you all the specialized projects we did along those areas. We typically get brought in when somebody else is struggling to make something like that work. So
since much of what we do through this particular initiative is designed to inspire others, show best practices, and show others how they can follow in the footsteps of those who are doing it successfully, what are a few of the tips you would offer people who want to replicate your successes in their own areas?
in this area, honestly, this industry is in an upheaval because of the $100 billion the federal government is funding. You know, Jeff Sabaka just gave out $100 million. I'm sorry, the federal government's handing out $108 billion for fiber deployments, and you know, Jeff Sabaka has just announced his $100 million towards fiber. That's causing issues with our industry in terms of where we can invest and not get overrun by somebody else getting federal subsidies. Rimrock is a good example of that, which is we were about to deploy up there. Actually, we are through the Final Mile project. And then Milo and I are sitting there in the meeting, and Frank from the Yavapai County said, yeah, we just awarded $8.6 million to somebody to bring fiber to all of those homes. You know, you can't stay in business when your competitor just gets an unlimited checkbook to compete with you. So that's causing problems. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to come behind infrastructure like that. We have a different path, so we're in pretty good shape. Barnaby, we actually have coverage across Buckeye, most of Buckeye, most of Maricopa. Florence, we're not there yet, and nothing in Yavapai or New River. We are in Morristown, though. In Wickenburg, I can refer you to another company who's up there is very good. But we are expanding Gila Bend. We just met with their city council last week, and we're in the process of working with their attorney on the contracts to deploy. They do not have, they have CenturyLink fiber to a couple of businesses in there. I think the school has it. I'm sorry, not the school, but one of the city buildings may have it. But Zayo actually has fiber running past the town. They're actually looking to see if they can tap it, but it's long haul fiber. That's an expensive tap. But CenturyLink's there. Give us 90 days. We'll be deploying out there with at least 100 meg service to the whole town.
So it always feels like historically Gila Bend, is it even in part of Arizona? Forget Maricopa. I mean,
I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, you're really breaking up, Barnaby.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit.
You still sound like Bane. You look like him too.
That's our special guest star, Tom.
I'm so sorry. There's people coughing left and right, and my mom is immunocompromised now. She's doing chemo, so
I can't understand you. Barnaby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Barnaby, this is something with your audio.
Yeah.
I think it might be your mic.
Your mic, you're siloning pretty bad is my point.
If you can type it into the chat.
I love the
maybe that
references.
way.
Well,
Well, you
sci-fi references there.
put it into the
I have a
chat.
question.
Please,
Yes,
Arlene.
ma'am.
Thank you for your presentation. What kind of environmental issues have you faced with the height of those towers and the concerns of local citizens, and how did you overcome that? I live in a beautiful area of California, the Central Coast, Big Sur, et cetera. We can't get away with towers like that.
No, and you're not incorrect. We have to permit most things. There's a federal law called the OTAD rule that was just recently modified that says that we can go 12 feet above any structure that's in the area.
12.
12 feet, which
That's
isn't
not
a
very
lot.
high. Yeah.
No, but so I don't have it in this presentation, but we have different models for those environments. We're actually in Tucson, where we have an area of 2,000 homes.
I'm gonna have to call you and
sorry.
Jason in 15 minutes. All right.
Okay, bye.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
A lot going on.
What you were looking at what you're looking at is a point to multi-point model. These are single tower or maybe a couple of towers. The other model that we use, we call it a micro pop model.
Mhm.
And we actually have equipment that can transport about 8 gigabits per second. It sits on a house 12 feet up in the air. You put over a square mile, you might put in about 15 of them. They look like little barrels. I mean, I could walk the equipment in here and show you guys. And then you can literally deliver 1 gig across an entire area like that and not need the big towers. So I'll when there's a few second break, I'll grab one and show you what that, but we use those in areas like you're describing where aesthetics are a big issue.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the solutions would be satellite transmission.
Well, so your two options are, well, if you're talking about Starlink, your two options are DirecTV, any of the geosynchronous satellites. The problem with those services is the latency is so high because of the distance. You're talking about 22,000 miles shot. That voice over IP and gaming doesn't work in those environments with that equipment. Starlink is a little bit better in the 60 to 80 millisecond range. And when they get more satellites, but they'll do better. But nobody gets to violate the laws of physics, and even Elon. And so he's still 300 to 700 miles away. The terrestrial microwave, which is the world we live in, will always be faster, cheaper, and our latency will be significantly lower. So gamers, that matters to gamers, but the other problem is they're not able to do high density areas. When you're that far away, you have to cover a large geographic area.
Yeah. No, I was thinking more of remote areas.
Yeah,
Yeah,
again,
great for individual users, but
Yeah.
not for institutions. And the
Yeah.
Starlink pricing starts at $99. You know, Rory's talking $10 to $30 services here. Starlink is 99 and up. Satellite's
Starlink actually
always
raised,
more expensive,
Starlink just raised their prices to $110 a month.
right?
So, yeah, they can't do. I mean, terrestrial microwave is going to be cheaper and faster no matter what you do, and the equipment costs are still coming down on that. Yeah, and for the most part, so it's good for what it does. Remote areas, it'll be good for a lot of mobile people, example, but you can't handle an entire area like a town. That would be tough to work with, even with their assets.
So I have a policy related question. I know there's a lot of federal money and state money going into broadband expansion right now. We've been working, talking about a lot of that over the last few months. Is that something where you are excluded in some ways because you're not doing fiber because they're specific, or because the policy is written in such a way that it makes it difficult for you to be a part of that?
We're completely locked out of the NTIA funding unless you own spectrum in the CBRS band. That's the way the rule is written.
And
Okay.
I do have a little different opinion than Rory, and we've encountered that before. My read is that the BEAD money, it's absolutely favors fiber, but it also insists that you connect the maximum number of unserved locations. And there's probably only a fifth or a tenth the amount of money it would take for fiber to do that. So to my mind, the more common expectation out there from states is that they have a portfolio management problem, which will have to have a mix of fiber and fixed wireless projects. Now, there's a further complication in that NTIA and their NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, and is talking about unlicensed spectrum in a very different way than licensed spectrum. And for people like Rory, that's also a significant complication. So I have every sympathy for the difficulties he and others have been put in, but I personally don't believe it's the case that none of this money is flowing to fixed wireless projects. I believe a significant amount will, because of the need to maximize the impact. And fiber is many times more expensive.
Right. That's why I was asking the question, but I didn't know if the legislation was stupidly written that excluded him.
The legislation is written to be technology agnostic, and many people are outraged with the NTIA for their fiber favoritism. The legislation is not fiber favorite. The legislation has stiff metrics about the performance level you must meet, but not about the technology you must use.
Mark
I'll
and
say
Rory,
fiber favoritism 10 times fast. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, let's look at chances for action here. Mark and Rory, what's one step people can take if they are interested in the approach that Rory's talking about here and want to try to duplicate that in their area?
You gotta bring in a consultant like me that can help you decide the feasibility or financial possibility. Because a lot of places get funded. Utopia was one of them. They got a pile of money to put in fiber every place, and then 3 years later they're going out of business and they're selling it to $1 to Google because it wasn't a financially feasible project. They fixed theirs, but honestly, that's when Mylan came up with this concept, and Mylan and the group, and I was that he came to me and said, if we did something like this, would it make it financially feasible? So basically to stay in business up there. Basically, this project pays for the CapEx, which is no different than the NTIA, the BEAD funding or any of these other projects. Although they're handled a little bit different, but this is a one-time payment of putting the infrastructure in. Then it's our job to make sure it stays profitable and stays operational. We wouldn't do it if we didn't think we could make that work.
Rory, if somebody's going to pursue that route of getting a consultant to help them get started on this, what are the things they should be thinking about before they're even on your desk or the desk of your colleagues or consultants?
Well, first you got to do the research to find out if there's any other money coming into the area from other sources or being considered. Rimrock was one of the areas. We've now found out there's money from 4 different sources, 3 federal, that are going in there to build infrastructure. So that's one issue. The other issue is, and I think Mark, were you reading that BEAD is actually considering the idea of overbuilding in areas now if they don't like as an option? I saw that yesterday.
Really, before this new round of funding, overbuilding was almost always impractical if anyone offered anything in your target new service areas. Now the new money from Treasury and what we call the BEAD money, the Infrastructure Act, the big money, defines unserved communities as those without a certain percentage of 25.3, and underserved as those without 100/20, allows for overbuilding of both kinds of communities, with the priority on the unserved, of course, versus the underserved. But all the new money has a new game plan for enabling overbuilding.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of areas that don't have some service in there. And if it doesn't have service, somebody's already filed to try to get some money, to build it out. Even St. John's, which had 5 megabits per second, we went to Comnet, and asked them if we could get fiber in the area. And they told us that they had already filed a request to raise, I think it was $4.5 million to put fiber in their area. So even the most remote areas have already been looked at probably by somebody, to find some other funding sources.
Mark, you and Steve Peters on a regular basis talk to us about the wonderful work you're doing with the Arizona Broadband Consortium that you're part of. Reflecting on the same question I asked Rory, what is your experience show in terms of what somebody should be thinking about if they're going to go for a consultant? What should they think about before they hit the consultant's desk so that they're in the best position to take advantage of the funding that's there and the opportunities they have for expanding broadband?
Sorry, you asking me or Mark?
I'm asking Mark the same question I
Yeah.
just asked you.
Sorry, I'm coming off mute. You really should have a general game plan and business model, not just be searching for one. And I mean, as someone who serves clients, I really find them in all states of preparation it varies greatly. Some are enormously naive and unprepared for it, and no amount of help is going to get them there. And I try with the teams I'm on to, tell them how far they are and what they would have to do, and not overindulge them, but be a little severe when necessary for the good of all. I don't want to make money doing something that is unlikely to bear fruit, right? And so as a consultant, I really say it's better if you're, basically have a business model, have the start of your plan, and are looking to vet it, qualify funding sources, look for strategic partners, that you're at some level of maturity, not just thinking you'd like to be in the rural broadband business.
Mark and Rory, I hope I'm throwing you an easy lob hit here. What are a couple of resources online that people might look at for the very business models you're talking about, or preparation for a consultant discussion?
Mark, you got to handle that one. I mean, everything I look at is technical.
Well, there are a bunch of them. I mean, there's community action guides, that talk about how you engage a community. And if you're a provider targeting a community, you should be engaging or planning to engage in those ways. There's a whole bunch of resources that we've shared at different times. I don't have them top of mind. ILSR, called Community Networks, is a great one. They have a toolkit, but there's a number of other models. Lev is involved with US Ignite. They have a great public-private partnership modeling thing that talks about how cities and providers can form partnerships across a continuum of opportunity, investment, and so on. So I could certainly provide a reading list, but also note that there is a Word document with 50 or 60 consultants active in the Arizona market and elsewhere on the AZBSN site that I developed and maintained. And I'm going to go find the link to that while we're still talking and put that in the chat.
Thanks, Mark. For that reason, I asked that question so that we would build that into this particular program for anybody watching for the first time and not totally versed in all the work we've been doing over the last couple of years. Barnaby's got a question in the chat. I'm going to invite Barnaby. Well, actually, you're having trouble with the audio, so I'll read this for you. Crystal ball, how feasible is the vision ensuring that all households across Arizona have 100 by 100 high speed?
We could do it.
We
like
love
we
that
tell
answer.
everybody
We
else,
can do it. That's the attitude we have in this project.
honestly, just point us in the direction it needs it. It's not a problem. One of the pictures I showed with Forest Lakes, which has those 60-foot trees, that is the hardest environment on the planet for us, to work with. And we've been able to, we tested out to about a little bit more than a half a mile with that 30-foot test. We've got a 120-foot tower going in behind it. I kind of wanted to go back to one thing you asked earlier about what should you do. I will tell you that, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, because Mark's much deeper in this. Our impression from all of the groups that I'm talking to now, plus the government contacts, is that if you can get a public-private partnership together very quickly, Casa Grande would be a great one. Gila Bend is a really good one that we're looking at hard. That if we work with them, we could jointly go in and try to go in for some additional grant money now, because it's so much of it is available. Those partnerships seem to be at the become a higher priority than an individual company like ours going in and trying to raise capital. Mark, is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. But Rory, you know me, I'll correct you even if you're right.
I lean on Mark a lot of those areas because, like I say, our area is technical. We're not much into the, we just need to know what needs to be done and what our time frame is. So,
again, for our audience for this, if you're watching this and you're new to the Connecting for Work and Learning initiative here at Arizona State University, Shaping EDU, recognize please that this has been going on for a couple of years. Our mandate is to work to bring people together to discuss how we can all work to get universal broadband throughout the United States for work and learning. We're an open group. We're always happy to have new people come in. If you're interested, you can contact us the Shaping EDU website, or you can email me, paul@paulsignorelli.com. Contact our director, Stephanie Perotti. Stephanie, we haven't had a chance for you to say anything. Again, recognizing that this is part of our ongoing series of recording resources for people. Is there anything you want to add about the project at this point?
Sure. So I would say stay tuned to the website and our YouTube channel. Please follow us on LinkedIn as well. We post updates on there regularly, and our Twitter page too. So we just hit 500 followers on LinkedIn. So thank you guys for following. I'd also note that the first week of October is Digital Inclusion Week, and that's nationally, not just for us here in Arizona, but we will be hosting, co-hosting with our friends at Digital Equity Institute, a town hall on that Monday, which I believe is the 3rd of October. And we'll be featuring some of the amazing work being done here in the lovely state of Arizona that we hope to take best practices from, share with our friends across the country, and look at how we can implement solutions that we've ideated and perfected, shall I say, here, and then share that with our friends so we can have more universal broadband access across the country.
Thanks, Stephanie. Let's throw this back open to questions, comments from the other people in the group today. Anyone have anything else they want to direct to Rory?
Barnaby asked a question about how much is needed and how long can you do it. Barnaby, those are numbers from a previous bid that we did with RDOF a couple of years ago. And yes, it can be done, and you could probably do it in a year to 18 months if you had enough resources. So that's our estimate from 2 years ago. Might be a little, obviously be a little higher now, but you know, given a target, it can be done.
We have a follow-up in chat from Barnaby. Rory and Mark both hinted at shortcoming in policy and funding the current digital equity efforts. What refinements should be forwarded to the FCC? And by the way, for those of you again watching this, we've had contact with Jessica Rosenworcel and others at FCC, and we're collaborating with them to the best of our ability to support what they're doing in terms of universal broadband. But getting back to Rory, to Barnaby's question, what refinements should be forwarded to the FCC and others in Washington, D.C. that would make the next round even better?
We actually got an award from Jeffrey Starks last year with COVID, because we hooked up, I think it was about 250 families in about 3 months in the West Valley that didn't have internet for through our Education Everywhere program. But the FCC, I don't know, my opinion is they need to just quit. They need to quit funding companies, larger companies that take away the innovation of the efficiency of some of the smaller companies. And they need to be more technology independent than they are. They're just too focused in the wrong direction, especially for areas. Texas is having the same problem. Arizona, mountain, any state with mountainous regions, fiber just doesn't make the most sense. So, but anyway, that's my opinion. Mark, I guarantee you got one better.
Yeah, no, I agree. They really should be technology agnostic. They call fiber future proof, but you know, you're using, among other things, Tirana gear, which will scale up over gigabit level, you know, which is 10 times the current required service level. So many of the wireless technologies are future ready, if not future proof. And I believe they've made a big mistake in the way that they have slanted the current guidance for fiber. The other thing is that the FCC should continue to open up spectrum. You know, look at what happened with Wi-Fi. They opened up a sliver at 2.5 gigahertz, and we all have Wi-Fi. There's a lightly licensed model like CBRS that Rory uses and others use, but there should be a continued drive for more spectrum, and the NTIA should get over this unlicensed spectrum is unreliable. There are decades of operating history that says when done right, it can be extremely reliable. And yes, there are certainly projects and points and companies and equipment that have been unreliable, but that shouldn't damn unlicensed spectrum completely. And the other big action area is in direct consumer benefits. We've had universal service for high cost telephony for decades. Many decades, we finally have had broadband subsidies, the EBB and the ECF. And those things should merge into a revised vision of universal service that gives those kind of benefits continuity beyond the one-shot window that they have right now. Those would be 3 from me.
So I have a related future-proofing question. The prices on this stuff, I assume, like every other technology, are declining. I mean, there probably is a bubble right now because of the chip shortage, but once we get past that, how fast are these things likely to get cheaper? I mean, to me, what I'm seeing, the question I would have if I were a skeptic would be, looking at those devices you're putting on a tower. I think you quoted at one point a $15,000 antenna times what, 4 or 8, whatever. Four. Yeah. So that's, when are those antennas going to cost $2,000 or,
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
because when they get knocked over, when they get damaged and you have to replace them, are we looking at a more expensive? The advantage of fiber is you put it in the ground, it's not going anywhere. And
it gets trenched up. There have been
Yeah.
significant outages from its failabilities, but I mean, you're right. The refresh cycle on fixed wireless is generally thought to be about 10 years, though fiber life is generally thought to be about 25 years. But your biggest problem is fiber is 5 times the cost and 5 times the time to deploy. Do you want
Sure.
it faster and cheaper now, or do you want it still in place in 25 years? I don't see a big decline in the high performance hardware costs, though, Tom. A lot of them are using proprietary chipsets. They have a big back end operating system environment for network monitoring. They have big staffs. They're, big companies. What makes things cheap is what happened with Wi-Fi. If you had the explosion in CBRS that you had in Wi-Fi, instead of having $500 customer premise equipment or $800, you would have $100 equipment. So it's kind of a volume game. And in fixed wireless, I don't know that you ever hit those volume levels or aggressive consumer price points like that.
We're getting near the end of the time that we have with Rory. Is there anybody else who hasn't asked a question, who has one final one they want to toss his way?
Thanks for your time, Rory.
You're welcome. We're actually, the noise behind me was the team of guys from another company that's, we're testing out their equipment and on top of that building right now that can replace cable directly using your own cable modem at 1 gig out to about 5 miles. So right from here, we're going back out to their field tests to keep pushing the limits. So, hey, I did want to answer the last question though. About the cost of the equipment. The cost of the equipment will continuously come down. Mark's correct in that there are high-end equipment for specialized areas, and there's low-end equipment using unlicensed spectrum. And the FCC is opening up a lot more unlicensed spectrum right now. They're opening up most of the 6 gig band. So when that happens, the $100 radios are going to still be $100, and that's where they're at today. With the next generation of radios that come out, it might go up to 120, but they're still going to be fairly low cost. So it will keep, in some areas you'll pay more. In all cases, Mark's estimate of 5 times less than the cost of fiber is accurate for the higher end equipment, but it's actually much higher, it's closer to 10 times for the lower end equipment, which is why we use both, so that we can offer, the better option for every family. Most families really only need 10 megabits per second for 98.9% of what they do. But the push to go to 1 gig causes a second problem, which still hasn't been address it all on a national level, and that's security. When everybody's got fiber to their homes, then security worldwide is going to be in a big problem because people do not know how to secure their equipment at their house. So somebody that has 10 or 20 meg today, and once a bot takes over their computer, when they've got 1 gig tomorrow, they're going to become significantly more dangerous about the damage that they can do. So that's a hot button for me, Mark.
No, good points. And your point about 6 gigahertz coming on stream, that's actually part of a Wi-Fi standard now called Wi-Fi 6E, uses this third new band. And those Wi-Fi devices, as they come online in volume, will not be any more expensive, and they'll bring the speed of 6 gigahertz delivery, to the Wi-Fi environment. But the high-end stuff's going to stay high-end in terms of cost, but still a lot cheaper than digging fiber. That even if you're micro trenching, getting fiber in existing streets and sidewalks and driveways is incredibly time-consuming and expensive always.
Yeah, no, you're dead on. But we will be hitting 1 gig per second with the $100 radios here in the next 12 months. So that the field testing is already happening right now. We're supposed to have some of that equipment here shortly.
Rory, we have time for a quick lightning round of the questions that Barnaby's put in. If you would read the questions, especially with the first one, define the term he's asking about ACP, give one-line answers, then we'll do a wrap up here.
I don't know what ACP is. I'm sorry.
Barnaby, if you can come back and let us know what that is. Let's go to the second question then.
Affordable Connectivity Program.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I do know what it is. We are trying to sign up for it, but it's a lot of paperwork. So, we'd like to offer it. I do think if you ask about heartburning, that is an issue because it's a lot of paperwork on the back end for us to process it. But the other issue is the criteria is so loose that honestly, 70% or more of our customers would probably be eligible for it. That would be a problem for us from a profitability standpoint. So especially when we're investing the amount of money we are right now and upgrading everybody to 1 gig. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation.
So Rory, final wrap-up question here. What, again, with the idea of us inspiring people toward action and positive action, what's one thing you would recommend to people who don't have adequate broadband now and want to work in their communities to promote that?
I'm not seeing they just need to contact, I don't know, Mark, I don't even know how to answer that question because I don't know a whole lot of towns that don't have adequate or are not either are under review for improved services right now. Honestly, they may be out there, but I don't have that kind of reach in them unless they pop up in like Final Mile. Every one of those towns we've done, except for St. John's, which really set me off how bad it was out there. They all have some plan for a higher speed internet in the near future. So, Mark, am I missing the boat on that one?
Yeah, I don't know as an individual who is a consumer what to suggest that they do. As a community, it's when those stakeholders come together in a broadband action team or some other form, economic development driven form, that they get their crap together, and learn how to make their voice heard. The Arizona $100 million grant program, I believe, was about 4.4x oversubscribed, and they thought a lot of those were worthy projects, but they're likely to have another 800 million to $1 billion coming down the pike the next 24 months to fund the rest of those that were worthy and many more. So it's a ground up game. The state's not going to look down on your community and say, these poor people, we're going to get them broadband. It almost always has to rise from the stakeholders up.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Stephanie, and everybody in the group that continues to meet so that we can promote broadband throughout the area.